It's time for On Point with Julian Phillips.
Welcome to On Point. I want to talk about a very hard topic here. This is going to be a hard conversation today, but it's one that we need to have. And I found out some things that were very astonishing to me in terms of the numbers. I don't know if many of you remember that movie called Taken. It was a three-part series with Liam Neeson. He was a CIA operative. And in the first series, he saved his daughter from being trafficked, sexually trafficked out. She was over in Europe. High power drama. I love dramas. Eye opening. But when you get to the reality of things, you begin to wonder and your eyes begin to open. Think about this. And I never really knew this in this country here. Did any of you really know that African Americans, the sexual exploitation of African Americans is higher than any race in this country? I never knew that. Another astonishing thing, I was looking up some facts here. 40% of victims of human trafficking are African Americans in this country. 40%. And the numbers go on, but I don't want to focus on the numbers so much as somebody else who's much more of an expert on this than I will ever be. But thank God for people like this. I want to bring in and welcome Wincy Terry Bryant. She's the arts co-chair of the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking and also the producer of Traffic Jam. Welcome to On Point.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie, and I appreciate that.
You know, Wincy, I was looking at these numbers, and they are astounding. And you don't think about this necessarily. You know, growing up in New York on one of the local stations here, they have these little things like their PSAs where they have, you know, this young person is missing. Have you seen them? I've seen a lot of people of color on them, but I never really put, you know, one and one together here and saying, my God, this is a huge problem in the African American community.
Yes. And it's the reason that I got involved in trafficking, because when other children go missing, they put out an Amber Alert. And when our children go missing, we put it up on Facebook. So I wanted to start with the education so that people would know, like on the ground, real grassroots, what you could do to prevent this from happening to our babies.
Well, let's talk about the numbers here, the prevalence of this in the African American community, especially for women and also obviously for young girls. What are we talking about? What are the numbers here?
Now, so the truth about the numbers, Julian, is we don't actually have the real numbers. So while we know that 40% of the people who are trafficked are African American and 50% of those are women. So whenever you look at the number of people being trafficked, half of that are women, and 80% of the entire trafficked community is minors. But so much of trafficking goes unreported. So there's no real way to have the real statistics. We only know for the people who call, but there are so many people who are being trafficked and won't call or don't even realize that they are being trafficked.
I want to talk about the economics of this because, you know, money is always a factor in anything here. But I want to take this down, Wincy, right now to ground zero. How are these young women trafficked? Where are they? What kind of positions of vulnerability are they in? And what can be done to get them out of those positions so they're not facing this kind of thing? I just can't believe this.
Yeah. So all really great questions. And you're right. It is an economic issue that causes people to become willing or involved in trafficking situations more often than not. So you mentioned Taken, and she was manipulated. And more often than not, people who are trafficked are manipulated. What people are starting to do in like local neighborhoods is they're starting to look around for the white vans with the double locks. And when I go to schools and organizations, I talk about that. But that is the most, if I could just use a word, it's the most barbaric form of trafficking. And it doesn't happen as frequently as people are thinking. because traffickers have gotten very sophisticated with their indoctrination. So they, first of all, they look for people who are in vulnerable situations, and vulnerability has a lot to do with your economic situation and status. So when I say people are being trafficked and they don't even realize they're being trafficked, when I go to schools and talk to young girls and I'm talking to them about the relationship they have with their boyfriend, a lot of times the relationship is a relationship where they are doing a certain amount of selling of themselves to get a promotion. So if they make a certain amount of money for him, or in their minds for us, and I can work myself out of the business by bringing in new girls, then we will run the empire together and I won't have to be on my back anymore, is what they believe.
So what you're basically telling me is, in many instances here, at least a certain percentage, there's a familiarity between the trafficker and the victim.
Absolutely. In fact, I believe the stat says that 80% of people who are trafficked by a friend, a family member, somebody they know.
This is unbelievable. And we're not talking about the old thing of the blaxploitation movies or the pimping on the streets. When somebody is trafficked, basically they're gone. They vanish without a trace. Where do they go? Do they stay in this country? Are they shipped overseas? What's the procedure here?
Well, trafficking does not necessarily involve the movement of a person. So originally, when we were getting our definitions of trafficking together, we thought that you had to take somebody, kidnap them, take them someplace else. Yes, that absolutely does happen though, Julian. People they vanish. We have a situation in the Bronx where girls are on their way to schools, and like 30 girls went missing over the last couple of years. Just they vanished. So they were kidnapped, obviously. But there are situations where we talk to school principals and girls are being trafficked during the day in school and coming home every night.
You know, I want to touch on this and tell me if these stats are right here. And this is alarming. And I guess it's almost in a sense, Lindsay, of airing dirty laundry. I got this stat here that says that 62% of human trafficking suspects are African American. Suspects. That's huge. Is that on point? Is that correct?
Well, again, with the numbers. So where reporting is concerned and politics are concerned, when we are arrested, accosted, picked up for crimes, we are typically prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And sometimes the numbers are slanted to make us look like we are doing things that other groups of people are not doing. Welfare, like criminal activity, and that's not necessarily the truth. Trafficking has seats in very, very high places with people who are excused for their level of criminality, where we are typically not.
Yeah, I'm an old dog journalist. I know where the bones are buried. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Let's just focus briefly on the economics of this. I mean, obviously, this is big business. Can you talk about the numbers, or scope, and nature of this?
Well, they say it's a $40 billion industry. It is more profitable than drugs and guns. And there's a movie called Tricked that I typically refer people to take a look at. It's a documentary where they were interviewing pimps. And whenever I tell the story, people say, well, how can you interview pimps? Why don't you just arrest pimps? Well, if you've ever watched any of the old movies, you would see that the girls get picked up, they get arrested, and the pimp comes and bails them out because they have not been caught in the middle of any crime, the pimp. So it has to be proven that they were even involved. So this pimp was saying that they asked him, why sell people? Like, why not drugs or guns? And he said, well, think about it. You can only sell a drug one time and it's gone. You sell a gun one time and it's out of your possession, but you can sell a person over and over and over again. And so that is the psychology behind selling people.
Is there It's unbelievable. Is there, and I can understand that psychology. It does make sense for those folks who are involved in evil. Is there a particular age range that these traffickers are looking for? Are they teens? Are they younger than that? What are we talking about here?
So let me tell you that the youngest person in the system is 2 years old.
What?
2 years old. The oldest person in the system is 76 years old. And I'm talking about sex trafficking, because there are other types of trafficking, but my focus is typically on sex trafficking.
Right.
But there is middle school students are particularly vulnerable because they so desperately want to be liked. The brain is not fully developed until you're 25 years old.
Right.
So traffickers go after middle and high school students because they can indoctrinate them. It's what they call mind hacking.
Mm-hmm.
So what they typically do is they look for them online, and there's a lot of this going on right now because we're right in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
And children are spending excessive amounts of time online.
Right.
And delighted to be meeting new friends. But here's what's actually happening. If your children were outside playing and a 40-year-old walked up to them and started playing with them, you as a parent, like a red flag would be raised, an alarm would go off, and you would address that situation.
Sure.
That's what's happening now online with the kids. They're online, they're playing all these games, Fortnite and all these other games where people can break in and play with them. And so these people who are playing with them are purporting themselves as their friends.
Right.
Their age. Maybe I live in your neighborhood. Don't you live on Johnson Avenue? Oh no, what street is that again? Just getting information out of them to befriend them. And they're grooming. But they spend the time. They spend the investment of time because what they say is the traffickers talking to typically about 40 people at a time. So 40 kids at a time. They know everybody's not going to bite, but somebody's going to bite. You get a couple of kids, and then they say a trafficker makes roughly about $250,000 a year per victim. You get you a couple of victims, you're a millionaire.
All right. God, I'm I'm speechless. Here's the deal, because we're running out of time here. What can one do, a young person, a parent, to protect themselves and safeguard themselves against human traffickers, human trafficking?
Right. That's an awesome question. And it's so pertinent because there are things that you can do. First of all, parents, you need to go through your children's phones. That is the point of contact for these traffickers. Online predators have increased their presence because they know children have increased their presence. Children have apps on their phones. One in particular is a calculator that will hide all of the interactive apps that you have on your phone. So these traffickers are talking to these kids through apps like Whisper, Scout, Grindr, TikTok. And these kids can hide all of those apps behind an app that looks like a calculator. So when you look at your kid's phone, you think that's just a calculator. If you see two calculators, click on the calculator. Ask them who they're talking to. You need to be more of a friend to your children than any outside force, because that's what they're doing. They are getting influence over these kids by having conversations. Also on trafficjam.info, and that's traffic with a K. If you log on there, there's a list of what you can do to protect your children and to join the fight against human trafficking.
This is great. We're running out of time right now. In 30 seconds, you have a thing called, you're a producer of Traffic Jam. Tell us a little bit about that real quickly.
Traffic Jam uses the performing arts to raise awareness about human trafficking. And we do it through plays and songs, events where I hire professional actors to get on stage and act out scenarios where kids are indoctrinated into trafficking so people can see it live on stage.
Wincy Terry Bryant, a great conversation, a hard one, and we're going to have to come back with this again. I'd like to have you back on the show so we can delve into this a little bit more, but this was an eye-opener, and I think it's made a lot of us on point. Wincy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Julian.
Once again, we're trying to empower people. And this is a show, I think, that sheds the light on something that is a little dark secret that a lot of us don't know about. In fact, it's a big dark secret. There are things that we can do with human trafficking. We're talking about people here. We cherish them. We cherish their minds and their bodies. Stay on point with information like this. Do something about it. Get involved. Always stay on point, and I'll be on point with you again next week.